Hello, and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a lot of fun today, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a quick stop in paradise. For me, that can only spell one place, Nosara Paradise Rentals, where the bill fishing is world class. We're going to check in with Craig Sutton there and see what's going on in Costa Rica, and then we'll bring it to Florida. We're going to start up the northeast corner of the Captain David Voorhees, work our way down the coast and up the west coast. You know, June's upon us. We're getting into summer fishing, and we need some help from the guys. We want to talk to the best experts in the state, and we want them to help you catch more fish. We're going to find out how to make your June pay off better when we get started with our trip around the state with the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter. Hey, we're brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flats pay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. All right, let's get her started. We're going to take a trip to Costa Rica, stop in Nosara, and talk to Craig Sutton, the purveyor of all the greatest fishing in Costa Rica. That brings us to Nosara. They checked our passport. We can get in the country. Let's stop and have a cool drink with Craig Sutton and find out what's going on in Nosara, Costa Rica. Craigie, are you with us?
Absolutely, Ricky.
Oh, man, I'm glad to hear from you, buddy. Everything okay in Nosara?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, Craigie.
Yeah,
now, it's different down there. We're about to go into June, which is the start of our summertime here in Florida, but it's not that way in Costa Rica, is it?
No, it's getting ready to go into their fall season, which comes up next week on that moon, and the current goes from being northbound to southbound, and it just creates kind of a different fishery for us, but I can sum this week up in 2 words. Wahoo!
Really? You don't see tremendous numbers of wahoo generally.
Well, we do and we kind of don't. We get the strike, but we've got so much mono in the water with that cobalt blue water.
Yeah.
It's where we get the hook in the right spot. Now, when we catch them, there's some nice fish. And this week, we were catching them on rappellers.
Aha, I see.
Lip divers, which a certain somebody that we both know turned me on to them. But, you know, and Ricky, I'm going to be down there next week, so I got to get them to tweak those rappellers a little bit like you taught me. So, But they've had Javier got one, and they're about 1.5 miles, 2 miles off the beach. There's sailfish mixed in with them, small Dorados, yellowfin, good yellowfin, but you're not going to get one of our big yellowfins on a rappel unless it's something weird. But, you know, they're kind of focusing on the wahoo, and they're catching quite a few.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
All right, now what changes in the fall down there? Do your guys change methods once we get into next month much?
No, we'll start getting instead of once in a while the big mahi and the big yellowfin, we'll get them with for every 200 plus pound yellowfin you catch, you lose about 10 of them. So, and you gotta, in our area, you gotta go light because of the water clarity. So it's a slippery slope no matter what or where you're at. I mean, just yellowfin those big ones, man, they don't give up and they don't get tired.
The little ones don't either. Yeah. You ever seen a yellowfin give up?
Yeah, but multiply it times 5 versus a 50 pounder. It's a tough hombre.
Oh yeah.
And you almost gotta. It's almost, I wouldn't call it luck, but you got a lot of things fighting against you.
Yep. And the
same with the big mahi. Same with the big mahi.
Sure.
The last year before COVID, we caught, which I think was the first part of that big school of mahi we've been getting. We caught like 6 mahi over 40, but we caught 5 yellowfin over 72 inches. So if you figure 1 out of out of 5 or 1 out of 10. That was a lot of shots at big yellowfin.
Yep. Craigie, let's talk next week if that's okay.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thank you, buddy. Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing, where it is the fishing's just heating up. The weather's just cooling down. Great time of year to be there, I promise you. All right, let's hit Florida. We'll start up in the Northeast section. I want Dave Borges to help the Northeast guys catch more fish in the month of June. David, June is right around the corner. We're upon it. What's going to be your number one target in June?
Well, my number one targeted species in June will be reds. For no doubt, I'll be after redfish in June, and mainly I'm going to be looking for them early in the morning, cruising up in shallow waters up on the flat.
Now, what tide do you want for that?
I want an outgoing tide. I want the high tide, the very first maybe hour or so of the outgoing tide is what I'm going to be looking for. And I want to find that tide to take place when it happens earlier in the morning. You know, this past week, Rick, we sort of got dealt a triple, or I'd say even a quadruple whammy. We had a lot of tough conditions, but I think for what I see in the future, things are going to start getting warmer. Everything's going to start warming up here real soon, and it's going to be early morning or late evening fishing as far as the summer goes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that, my targeted species is going to be the redfish. I target these redfish 12 months out of the year. And the neat thing about Northeast Florida as compared to when you get down into South Florida and stuff like that, you have to change tactics because we do have a seasons up here. We have a cold winter sometimes, and we have very hot summers, and we have spring and fall and all that good stuff. And so you got to change your tactics when this water starts to warm up. And what I'm talking about warming up is, it's going to get in the 80s and it's going to get in the mid 80s. And I've actually seen this water get as warm as 91, 92 degrees. And for anglers who's never been in water that warm, it makes for tough fishing. These fish will tend to move out of that hot water. They become a bit lethargic, and they will move into that deeper water, and they'll tend to feed early in the morning and late in the evening. Just because of the cooling of the water, and even do a lot of night feeding, believe it or not.
All right. When we get back in that shallow water early in the morning, what are we throwing?
Well, I'd like the topwater plugs. I mean, I like starting out fast, topwater plugs, move them, see what kind of reaction you get from these fish. If not, I'll go with either a crankbait or something like a soft plastic. I really think they're going to really be starting to feed more heavily on these on the mullet. So I'm going to be looking for those big reds chasing mullet and stuff like that.
Now, you mentioned you're throwing different lures, so you're not starting out with mullet. You're starting out with an imitation of a mullet, a lure.
Absolutely.
So you can cover. So is that so you can cover more territory?
Well, not really. Mullet to me are difficult to keep in your live well. I don't like using live mullet personally myself, unless I'm fishing a deeper spot. But if I'm going to imitate mullet, my favorite lure is going to be like a surface walker.
Got it. Excellent way to go about it. And you want the high falling tide. That's with the water coming out of the grass and shallow water, huh?
Right. And a lot of times, if early in the morning when you have those calmer conditions, you'll see these fish. And one thing I always tell my clients, don't throw at these fish. You'll see these fishes moving down the bank. Try to stay up ahead of these fish. I mean, I like to throw 3, sometimes even 4 feet, 5 feet ahead of these fish and sort of wait for them to start getting a little closer to you and then start working that surface walker. And usually right off the bat, you're going to get one or two reactions, which is what, you want to see them either attack that thing or they're going to be spooked by it. And usually if they're spooked by it, I'll give it a few more chances. But then if I'm seeing them spooked by it, to me, I'll go right to a soft plastic after that.
Perfect. Okay. One more quick one before you go. When you're talking soft plastics, David, are you using jig heads? Because I was talking with Steve Dahl, and he loves to use soft plastic jerk baits, but all he does is nose hook them and just pull them that way. How do you hook them?
I use the jig, and I will actually go with a lighter jig. Instead of the 1/4 ounce, I'll go with maybe an 1/8 ounce. And, you're not going to, it's going to be hard to get that distance, but you got to remember on a lot of our flats, they're not that big. A lot of our flats are really small indentions that are just right off the intercoastal waterway. And so, the light line, braided line, you can get some good long casts with that. But that's what I like. And I do like something like a jerk shad or something like that, sort of a jerk bait. I've had really good luck with those and fished them absolutely with no lead at all, just the bare hook.
I see. All right. Are you a big fluorocarbon guy?
Absolutely. 100%. And I will probably even, go with a 2.5, 3 foot leader.
How about that? Excellent. David, you just helped our guys catch more red in June in Northeast Florida. Thank you so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Absolutely, Ricky.
All right, Captain David Voorhees with the Northeast Florida Report, and a good one at that. Now, I'm not sure what Captain Jim Ross's favorite fish is down in the East Central region, but he's going to tell us. Jimmy, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Rick, and my favorite fish to catch in June is tarpon.
Aha! Big ones, little ones?
Well, we get the fish coming up the beach that, basically are leaving the Keys in May, and after that Palolo worm hatch happens, and they come up and they start getting in the pogey pods, the pilchard pods, from anywhere from about the Vero Cove all the way through to Canaveral. And then when you get a little north of Canaveral, they actually kind of start switching over off of the live bait that's inshore to the shrimp boat trash that the guys are jumping when they're out there dragging their shrimp nets.
Jim, do you guys still pursue them that way? Do you still fish behind the shrimp boats for them?
Well, I don't. The guys at Ponce do, yes.
I see.
I personally do not. I fish Ponce, or I don't fish Ponce. I fish, Canaveral, and I fish Sebastian. So we do the pilchards, the pogies. We do the live bait thing, and it's there's a couple little things that you can do that really make a difference as to whether or not you catch fish whenever you're doing that kind of a live bait scenario. One of the things that I found is that a lot of guys want to use a leader system that is too long. And by what I mean by too long is they'll use 80 or 60 pound leader, but they'll use like 5 or 6 or 7 feet of it because the tarpon is 5 or 6 or 7 feet long, and they want to keep that fish from chafing on its gills, chafing on its body, chafing on its tail. But what I found is when we switch over to our braided lines and use a little bit softer rod, if you use let's say some 30 pound braid or some 40 pound braid, and you attach that to a piece of 40 pound leader, then that we build a 2-stage leader. That last 2 feet is 60 or 80, just enough around the mouth and the gill plates. And by doing that, your baits get way better action in the water. If you have 5 or 6 feet of 80 pound in front of a menhaden or a pilchard, it's almost like dragging it on a rope.
Right.
But if you only have like that little 2 feet, then the bait fish can be a little more active. They can be a little more erratic and scared whenever the tarpon comes up to them. And what the tarpon wants to see, just like snook, the tarpon wants to see a reaction in the bait. As they approach the bait fish, they want to see that bait fish get scared and try to flee. And that is the triggering mechanism, that prey predator relationship. When that prey starts to flee, that predator says, "Oh, I don't think so," and goes, puts him on lockdown. And that particular type of scenario, when you have a 2-stage leader, that scenario can happen much, much more frequently. You get more bites. Obviously, more bites equate to more hookups. More hookups equate to more landings.
Excellent.
The second thing that we do is I've tried all different hooks, and a 7/0 size tournament circle hook, and I personally use the VMC 7385 model. But the circle hook is a small, thin hook. Don't use a thick one like you would for a commercial long line type scenario. You want one of these very strong but very thin type of tournament circles like they use for sailfish. It has better penetration. It has a little bit of springiness to it, and they don't seem to fall out of the fish nearly as quickly as some of those larger round type circle hooks, because they're flat on the sides. And I forgot what they call that when they flatten the sides on the hook. But that particular process gets a better penetration and doesn't wallow a whole lot in the fish's mouth for the hook to then fall back out of.
Jim, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you could be talking about the non-offset vanadium steel 7385BN 7/0. I might know something about that. You know what I was doing? You know what I was doing before we started the podcast tonight is I'm going sail fishing day after tomorrow. So you and I are brothers of the 7385.
I love that hook.
Yep.
That hook has turned me into a better tarpon guide because it has caught more fish for my anglers than some of the other hooks that I've tried. And so obviously a successful angler equates to a successful guide. And that's what it's all about. It's about making people happy, going out there and putting smiles on their faces. And
I can also tell you that with that thinner hook like that, your bait just moves so much better in the water. I mean, forget the fact that the tarpon can't get rid of it, and it gets in him so easily, but your bait moves so naturally because it doesn't have that big, heavy, thick hook to pull around.
Exactly.
Jim, I don't know that I've ever heard it said better. Thank you so much, and that ought to make everybody in the East Central and everybody that tarpon fishes anywhere a little bit better at it. Thank you so much, and please tell me we can talk to you next week.
I'm looking forward to it, Rick.
Thank you, Jim. Captain Jim Ross from the East Central section of Florida with great tips on beating big tarpon. All right, let's head on down to Stuart. We're getting there. We'll work our way down. We'll check in with Captain John Earhart right after this. Hey, we've survived winter, and my favorite time of year is here. It's time to put away all the high-speed wahoo stuff and break out some of the tackle that can put the fun back in blue water fishing. Listen, we all dream about the days when a blue marlin crashes our spread, but let's talk about some facts. Almost all the marlin we see in Florida are under 300 pounds, and we just don't see the 50-pound dolphin like we used to. So why not stop by either one of the strike zones in either Jacksonville or Melbourne and check out the new Talicas and Speedmasters designed to put the fun back in blue water trolling. What makes Shimano and Strike Zone the only team you need to know? Well, that's because while you're buying your new weapons, the staff at Strike Zone can splice 500 yards of braid backing onto your new reels just to make sure there's nobody in the blue water that you can't handle. So stop by Strike Zone and just feel the weight of the new Talavera rods matched with Speedmaster or Talica reels, and you'll see in a hurry that it's time to put the fun back in Florida blue water trolling. Our thanks to Jim Ross for a great East Central report. Now it's time to stop at my favorite little fishing village. I'll be fishing there day after tomorrow, and that would be one Stuart, Florida, and we're going to check in with our pro, John Earhart. John, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Man, we're glad to have you. June's right around the corner. For a lot of folks, they won't hear this until June starts. What's your favorite fish to fish for in June?
When I think of June, I picture flat, calm seas, and I'm targeting sailfish. You only have to go a few miles out, and it's pretty easy fishing, as you well know.
And the reason I had to laugh so hard, John, I was 9 years ago now. I started hosting the Best Boat television show out of Stuart, and we're testing all these boats, and I keep seeing all these free jumping sailfish, and I asked my partner, I said, "Are these sailfish always here like this in June?" And he said, Uh-huh. And I said, "Well, do you guys fish for them?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, do you catch as many as we're seeing?" Yeah, we do. We just didn't want to tell you. Because I don't love anything more than sailfish, but I'm with you, buddy. Sail fishing in June out of Stewart is a blast. Help us out. How are we going to catch more sailfish in Stewart in June?
Most guys this time of year, they're gonna stop in the morning about a mile out the inlet, and they're gonna catch live greenies preferably. That's one of my favorite baits for sail fishing in June, other than a live goggle eye. But most of the time, you're gonna have to pay to get a live goggle eye, and they get pretty expensive. So you stop, you sabiki, 2 to 5 dozen live greenies, or however many you want to put in your live well. You can chum with them too, but typically 2 to 5 dozen is ideally what you'd want to have. And I'll go out to anywhere 90 to 160 feet, sometimes straight out, or I'll stop, like you said, when you see one jumping. And you're going to want to run a spread of probably about 4 greenies, and you're going to fish one or two mylar dredges. It's a real light dredge on a light wire, and you're going to have several mylar flashing pieces that are on that dredge. And you'll run it down anywhere 10 to 30 feet down, whatever you feel comfortable running, and maybe 75, 100 yards back, sometimes closer in, sometimes further out. Just depends on the conditions and how they're biting. And you're going to fish those greenies, a couple of them right by those mylar dredges, and then you're going to fish a couple of them further back. Sometimes when I'm fishing those greenies way back, I'll put a float on them, so it'll be an indicator so I know where my bait's at. And off that float, I'll run, maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 foot a leader, and then I'll have a small circle hook and my greenie on there, obviously. And a lot of times, I swear, Rick, they come up and they look at that indicator and they turn over and grab the bait. So not only does it work great for you seeing where your bait's at and making sure they're not getting tangled, I swear it draws those sailfish in too.
John, I really didn't want you to tell all the secrets. I was really kind of hoping you'd hold on to some of that, but you're absolutely right. Now, jigging with sabikis, what size sabikis do you like?
For greenies, I'm going to use a larger sabiki. It depends on the day. I mean, my go-to is usually a number 6, but I'm just trying to have one that's going to catch them no matter what. So if they're big greenies, bump up your sabiki size. If they're smaller greenies and sardines, obviously you're going to downsize your sabiki and make sure that hook is a little bit smaller so you get those smaller baits. It varies day to day.
Now, is what you're calling a greenie, is that also called a thread fin?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Greenie or a thread fin,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay, and how do you hook them?
When I'm trolling them?
Right.
Typically, I'm going to hook them up through the bottom and the top lip gently. If I'm going to be trolling at a little bit of speed, maybe 1 to 3 knots, I might hook them through the bottom and the top lip. Sometimes, if they're biting really well and I'm just sitting there dead boat, I'll hook them right in the top of the back before the dorsal fin. Enough to where the bait stays on the hook, but you want to make sure you don't hook them in the spine, because you hook them in the spine and, they're not going to swim anywhere. They're just going to die. And I like to have a nice frisky live bait. So when you're handling them, be very gentle with them. I cover their eyes. I put the hook in ever so slightly, make sure you're not wallowing out a big hole, and you're good to go.
Interesting, Cap. We appreciate it. I think that's going to help people catch more sailfish in June. And the reason that I had to laugh is everybody goes down there in the wintertime and fights that god-awful weather and pulls ballyhoo and tries to get them. It has also been my experience, the fish are bigger in the summertime. John, we've caught some monsters down there in June.
Yeah, I think they come in to spawn. I mean, they're jumping all over the place. They give themselves away. It's a great for fair weather fishermen. I mean, what more can you ask for? I mean, sailfish is definitely my number 1 target here in June.
Well, ask me day after tomorrow and I'll tell you. All right, Cap, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, John. Let's travel on down to South Beach. It's never freezing down there, and talk to the mayor himself, Captain Alan Sherman. Cap, how we doing?
We're doing just fine. We're definitely not freezing here in sunny Miami for sure.
Do you remember the last freeze in your house? It's your house?
A freeze. Well, it got kind of cold for a change this year, but nothing like that. I think it was 2010.
Yeah,
was the
2010
last time we had a big freeze.
Was the real freeze for all of us, I think. Yeah, I think you're right. June's we're right on the cusp of June. For a lot of people, they won't hear this until the 1st of June. So, Alan, I want to know what your favorite fishing around Miami is and how we can help guys catch more of them.
All right, so I gotta explain first. Things are changing, weather-wise, fishing-wise, every year, and this year especially. And what I mean by that is, this year we have sargasso weed lines like you cannot believe. It's everywhere. It's in the bay, it's in the ocean, it's on the beaches, it's out in the Gulf Stream. Not something usual for the end of May, early part of June. But because of that, we also have mahi-mahi, dolphin in the area, which we don't usually have until late June, July. So for this June, I would say go out there and give the dolphin a shot while they're here, because it may be an early season. It may end earlier than it does just because it's starting earlier than it usually does. But with that said, there's a catch to that. Because of how much sargasso weed is out there, trolling isn't normal. You know, you can't rig a bait like you normally would, a rig ballyhoo or a strip of bonita or a feather, and just troll it along a weed line, because there's just so much weed out there that they get caught up in the weeds, and you spend the whole day trying to clear it. So the key to it, for me anyway, is to use soft plastics and to rig them weedless. There's a lot of them on the market today that are 8 inches, 10 inches, 6 inches. So you take a weedless hook, like a Mustad Kevin Van Dam weighted grip pin hook in a 4.0 to 6.0, and you take a 8 to 10 inch or even a 6 inch soft plastic, and you rig it weedless, just like you would for bass fishing. And you control those baits right through a weed line, and it doesn't usually hang up. You may hang up on occasion because, you know, as you hook fish, the bait might get torn a little bit and the hook may penetrate. But in the most part, that soft plastic will work its way through a weed line without getting hung up, and the fish are going to eat it. A dolphin are aggressive, and that bait looks like something they might eat. So that would be my tip. It works for me. I catch a lot of nice dolphins doing it like that. Especially when there's so much weed out there that it just gets frustrating to troll natural baits.
All right, help me out with your favorite soft plastics, if you would.
So this year I'm using one called a Savage Gear. It's a dragon tail, and they come in 6 and 8 inches. Color's not as important. White ones are really good, blue with a little metal flake in it. Last year I was using some Rapalas that were working well for me. It really just, another lure that Savage has, it's a pulse tail ballyhoo. It's really realistic. It comes so that you can pass the line through the bait, out through its center section, and then that is where the hook would go in. And you can rig that weedless as well. Dynamite lure, looks like a ballyhoo. Dolphin love ballyhoo. That's what those other soft plastics kind of resemble, and 2 dynamite baits that are going to catch you some dolphin and keep your head sane from having to clear the weeds every 5 seconds.
So it's called give me the name of it again. All
right, it's a pulse tail ballyhoo made by Savage Gear.
Savage Gear. Okay. All right.
And then it's also a dragon tail made by Savage Gear.
Perfect. I've got to go check them out. I'll be at Strike Zone before you know it. Alan, that sounds like a great tip for catching more mahi in the weeds. And Lord knows, all up and down the East Coast, we got plenty of weeds this year. Thank you so much, buddy.
Way.
Now let's jump across the state real quick and see how things are going in 10,000 Islands with one Steve Dahl. How we doing, Captain Steve?
I'm doing great. How are you, Rick?
I'm doing fine. Steve, if you'll take a look at your calendar, you will see that June is right around the corner. You knew that, right?
It is.
What's your favorite fish to fish for in June?
Permit.
Permit?
Permit.
All right.
Sounds crazy, but go ahead.
You got a lot of splaining to do, Lucy. I want to know how to catch a permit in 10,000 Islands in June.
Well, it's really, our area is so predicated on the backcountry, and it does see a lot of pressure for our typical big, 3, the redfish, the trout, and the snook. And then obviously we're just kind of coming out of tarpon season. But everybody's kind of, what everybody kind of overlooks is our near shore fishing. And I talk about it a lot. And one of the the hidden gems we have in our area is a very, very healthy permit fishery, but it's unlike anywhere else in our states because we generally associate permit with, you know, the Biscayne Bay area or down in the Keys.
Right.
You know, gin clear water, turtle grass on the flats. You know, very difficult fish to catch, you know, because they're so elusive, and you need, you know, the utmost of stealth to be able to do that. You really kind of, in our area, we don't have those type of conditions, if you will, with our, you know, tannic water. So our permit's set up offshore, and I even call it near shore. I mean, you know, there's structure within 5 miles of land, all within eyesight of land, that you can catch permit on. And the beauty of this is what you're really looking for. And there is a little bit of local knowledge you're ultimately going to need, but I also equate it to the homework too. You got to put in a little bit of your homework. The resources are there to understand which wrecks have the highest relief. So if you go to Collier counties, you know, if you just Google Collier County, you know, wrecks and reefs, it'll give you all the GPS numbers, what depth they're in, what's the composition, and then it'll also give you relief numbers. And when I speak relief, that's ultimately how far that structure comes off the bottom. So if we're in 40 feet of water and they say the relief is, 10 feet off the bottom, that's a decent amount of, structure off the bottom. So that's what we're looking for, is those structures that have the most vertical orientation possible. So we also have a bunch of, disabled radio towers out by us, kind of southwest of Cape Romano. Those also can hold permit too. And so, that's your best bet. Make yourself a milk run of those spots and you're going to ultimately find permit. And, the very best way to attack them is with live blue crabs. And we're coming out of tarpon season, and blue crabs are still readily available at local bait shops. However, you want a little bit smaller ones. You want to kind of get in that like $50 size is really what it is. A lot of you young guys probably don't even know what a $50 is, but gonna have to get I like to call it maybe even kind of like 2 inches across on the carapace, which is the hard shell of the crab. 2 to 2.5 inches. You can use 3-inch ones, it's fine. And the concept is make that crab look as natural as possible.
Steve, now we get a lot more current on the East Coast than you guys get, but the hardest part I've always got with teaching people to free line is keeping pressure off of that bait. That bait has got to swim down like it's a natural, live, swimming away blue crab, doesn't it?
Yep, it does. That is absolutely the key.
Cap, we always appreciate it. Please tell me we can talk with you next week.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it, Rick.
Thanks, Steve. Take care. Captain Steve Dahl, which has just helped the guys in 10,000 Islands catch more permit. One of the top fish on a lot of anglers' bucket list, a permit, and Steve just helped you catch yours. Let's check in with Captain Greg Stamper in Southwest Florida, why don't we, and see what's happening there.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils.
What?
Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahanoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to you second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Now, let's come on up to the Southwest area and see what the captain of Snook Stamp Charters, Captain Greg Stamper's got for us. Greg, are you with us?
I'm right here. Hear you well.
I'm glad to hear your voice, Cap. You know, they tell me June's right around the corner. It's going to be sometime next week. I want to know what your favorite fish is to fish for in June.
Well, it did start a little early this year, and my typical pattern in June is to hammer these juvenile tarpon that flood into our bays and our rivers and are very exciting. It's kind of an early morning thing, Rick, for the most part. So I'll go after these juvenile tarpon for the first hour or two, depending on how much cloud cover we get. And then I usually end up moving on to the beaches because our snook bite will be fantastic. So that can fill up a nice time, and it's even better because I'm not out there when it's crazy hot.
Well, you know, you and juvenile tarpon have got a relationship like I've never seen. There's no statutes on.
No, you know what? You cannot take a tarpon out of the water
Good.
for more than 40 inches.
Good.
So these fish that are anywhere from 10 pounds up to about 30, give or take, most of them are going to be underneath that number, and most of them we can pretty much get to the boat in a few minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if you get a crazy one. And it's really fun for the client. And there's a lot of different ways we do it, Rick. The easiest way is obviously with the whitebait or the peeled sardines. We catch those the day before, or if you're really crazy, go out early in the morning before the sun's up and throw your cast net on some of the bridge pilings, and you will get those same baits. And then you head to those fish at first light. Now, for the people who can cast really well, you can use artificials. I tell you what, those DOA terrorized, those are funny. That's one of my favorite baits for that. But I also like things like the redfish magics, the smaller sizes and the white. They work very well. And then there's a couple other things like money minnows.
Whoa.
Freshwater stuff.
Hold on just a second. Redfish magic's a spinner bait, isn't it?
No, that's they make them with the spinners on it. But you can just buy the tails by themselves.
Okay, I'm with you.
On your little jig head.
Okay,
yeah, that's money. That's really money right there. And then of course, for those who really are up for the torture method, we can do it on fly early in the morning, depending on the watercolor. I'll just change my fly colors up. But the old black and purple is probably the best for the silhouette as you get that first bite.
All right, real quickly, what types of areas do the guys need to look for fish rolling, or are there particular spots that they need to find this juvenile tarpon?
A pattern that you can find. So tarpon are going to like these things are going to like one of two things. Either the deepest spot you have around, that's something that they're going to be thinking about. So we have some areas that might be 20 feet deep in some of these back little lagoons and stuff, and believe it or not, sometimes they're in canals because they dug them out so deep back in the day, and that's actually the deepest spot within within a mile or two from where those fish are. But the ones that we really get in there that are a little more technical as far as coming in slowly on your trolling motor into these areas, so you're not making a bunch of push, you're not making a bunch of noise, you're being very quiet, you'll tend to find these fish anywhere there's a flat, usually it's touching a mangrove shoreline somewhere, and it'll have a nice soft drop off. So if that flat at, say, low tide is a foot, it might be 2 to maybe 3 feet of water where this little dip is. A good way of looking for these dips, if you're just in an area you've never been, is look where you find these blue crab traps, because those guys ain't going to put their traps anywhere where that water's going to run out of.
Right. Good point. And is it important to look for rolling fish?
Yeah, that's where I start to recognize how they're attitude every day. So we have a couple guys in our neighborhood that like to do this, just like I do. And we talk to each other, and we have areas where we know these fish should be during certain times. And if we're all going to go out and do something very similar, we will all talk to each other and hit a different school or a different area. What that helps for, Rick, is very helpful. If you get somewhere, those fish aren't acting right, and you know your buddy's, 3 miles away on a different pack of fish, he might say, yeah, these fish are eating, so we can still get it done.
Mm-hmm. I see. Now, you say they're not acting right. Do they roll different when they're feeding than they do when they're not feeding?
Typically, you're going to see a fish that only you see one here, one there. They're not tail slapping. When I see multiple rollers, when they come up and they're going quickly, they roll quick and they go back down.
Yep.
And there's packs of them. It could be 2, 3, 4 of them all coming up at the same time. They're hunting. They're hunting together. They're all just coming up real quick to get that little shot of Red Bull so that they can go back down there and chase those other fish. Yeah, that's what they're doing. So they can go back down there and chase those other fish that don't have quite as much energy in them because they're able to take that gulp of air, run it across their gills, and get fired up. So when you start seeing those fish, you know it's on.
Not everybody realizes that tarpon actually have a rudimentary form of lungs. And when they come up and roll like that, they're actually gulping air, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And if you pay enough attention and it's calm enough, they'll give away where they are because you'll see little bubbles come up and hit the surface as they're moving. So you know which way they're going and where you should be able to throw a bait in.
Yes, you will. And you, Greg Stamper, just helped the guys in Southwest Florida catch more tarpon in June, and we really appreciate it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
You got it, Rick. I'll talk to you later. Have a great one.
Thanks, Greg. You too. Captain Greg Stamper from Snook Stamp Charters. Hey, it's finally getting hot, and of course that means the water is warming up. And just like the great fish always do, the biggest and the baddest of so many of the species that we fish for will soon be heading to deep water in an attempt to cool off. You name it. If it feeds deeper in the water column, it can't refuse the DOA Terrorize. It dives straight down and crawls across the bottom with an action that no deep feeder can resist. Whether it's a crappie deep under some lily pads or a tarpon rooting around the bridge pilings, DOA makes a size and color Terrorize they just can't say no to. Flashing that big bright eye in front of any bottom-feeding game fish is just unfair. Hey, maybe that's why they call DOA lures the unfair advantage. Now let's pull up into West Central, where our expert, Ray Markham, there are none better, is going to teach us about his favorite fish for June. Raymond, how are you?
I'm great. Tell Captain Greggy he can come up here and catch some full-grown tarpon.
Yeah. I remember wanting to catch full-grown tarpon. Not that I can remember that clearly, but I know I did it. And I know
I'm right there with you.
I know I don't need to do it anymore. I can tell you that. How's your fishing been this week?
Fishing's not been bad. I mean, we've had good tides. If you get out early, the first few hours of daylight is your best bet. We're starting to get into some 90-degree temperatures now, and water temperatures are going up, and the bite just seems to kind of dwindle after about 10 o'clock in the morning or so. So if you can get out the first few hours of daylight, 6:30 until around 9 or 9:30, you're pretty good. And things going on. We've got lots and lots of snook. Guys that are just hammering them out there on the beaches with fly rods and jigs and that kind of thing. But, the guys that are prodding the deep water around the passes, they're the ones that are usually catching the big fish.
Gotcha.
Those big ones are just hanging down around the pilings and something like a DOA Terrorize, big trolling model bait buster, one of those kind of lures that get down deep and just kind of drag it on the bottom, and they will get it.
Ray, I got to ask you, word has it that June is right around the corner. I've been told that. What's your favorite fish to fish for in June?
Well, it's almost feeling like June right now, but it's real close. Honestly, I like getting out early from June through about September or October.
Mm-hmm.
I like getting out crack of dawn, or a little bit before if you can. And I really like targeting trout. First thing in the morning, depending on the tide. Now, if you got new and full moons, you're going to look at a low tide in the morning. So I'll probably hit channel edges and potholes and things like that. But if you can get up shallow, some of the biggest trout you're going to find probably anytime that time of the month, you're going to find big trout in those skinny water areas. They'll be up feeding, trying to stay away from the porpoises.
All right. What's key to catching bigger trout?
Well, full moon of June, typically we have a kind of a shrimp flush that comes out of the bay. They're heading out the Gulf to spawn. And any kind of shrimp lure, whether it's a DOA shrimp or actually if you put a live shrimp under a popping cork, something like that, and hit it somewhere around where you've got some good current flow, good water flow, whether it's channels or I guess deep passes, things like that, you're going to find some trout. And as I said, if you get out either early or get out late, and particularly around the new and full moons, if you get out late in the afternoon with that strong outgoing tide, you're going to find unbelievable trout action. Just you set your popping cork to whatever depth that you're fishing, maybe about a foot shallower than that. Give it a strong pop. The DOA Deadly combo that I use never misses. So
now,
it's a good deal.
Now, Ray, it seems for us, especially when we're on the trolling motor, that we do best on really big trout if you can make a long cast. Is it that way over on the West Coast too?
I think it's that way everywhere.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we have a lot of boat traffic here, and it does kind of put things on edge for fish when they get run over a lot. But for the same token, fish that get run over constantly, there's a lot of times that those fish they kind of get used to it. And they're kind of hearing the noises of motors and whatnot. But literally, I think anytime you can get long distance casts, get them away, get the lures or bait away from the boat, the farther you can get it away, the better. That way the fish isn't going to be so wary, will be more apt to bite.
I think big trout are the worst about that too. And so for June, you want a shrimp imitation or a live shrimp to catch the biggest trout around, right?
I'll either do that or I'm going to throw a mirror lure top dog. I absolutely love fishing big topwater baits. And some of the biggest fish I've caught have been on topwater lures. And it's so freaking exciting watching these things blow up on the surface.
Yes, it is. And isn't it? And let me tell you something that I learned about that, but it took me 25 years of fishing with a guy to learn it, that he was right. He would throw that lure, he would see where it landed, and then he'd never look at it again. I mean, he'd look and talk to you, or he'd look up at the sky, he'd go through his tackle box. He'd be working that lure the whole time, but he knew that when Rick got a strike at a topwater lure, if the trout didn't get it right away, the lure was going to be wrapped around the radio antenna up in the boat somewhere.
That's really good advice for anybody. I mean, honestly, I really think if you could cast for a blind man, give him the rod and let him work the lure back to the boat, he would catch more fish than anybody on the boat.
Bingo.
But they're not setting the hook on the strike. They're setting on you reel until you feel.
Right.
And when you feel that pressure against the rod, set the hook.
Yep. That's excellent advice, and I think you just helped everybody in West Central Florida catch more trout in June. Thank you, Raymond. We always appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We'll catch you later.
Captain Ray Markham. There are none better on the West Coast of Florida, I promise you. Now, we're going up into Big Bend. We're going to go to Homosassa, and if we can get him out of a traffic jam, we're going to talk in with the mayor himself, Captain William Toney. Mr. Mayor, are you with us?
We are here right downtown Homosassa.
All right, okay, now, are you okay? Can you focus? Is traffic too bad?
Well, it's actually a little busy down here tonight. They had an all-women's tournament here in Homosassa with a catch-and-release platform. So, yeah, there's quite a few folks out there, going after some fish today and hanging out in town. But it'll be all right. They'll be all cleared out by Monday.
Well, hold on. How many women did you catch and release?
I can't disclose that.
Oh, that's not what you meant. I thought that. Okay. I thought you meant. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Different kind of tournament altogether. Right. William, they tell me that June is right around the corner, and I want to know what the best action is like in Homosassa for June. What are you going to target?
Well, you know what comes around is June 1st is opening day for grouper, and we have abundant rock piles out, starting as shallow as 5 feet all the way out to 80 feet as far as you want to go. So everybody on the Big Bend area is going to be looking forward to putting some gag grouper in the freezer. So, you know, it all starts, of course, it's June 1st, so it's going to be warm. So what I would suggest, hit that water out at 18 to 30 feet, live pinfish on the bottom to get your limit of gags.
All right, now what is the limit over there?
All right, they have minimum size is 24 inches, and you're allowed 2 per angler with no captain's take. So if you get on the right rock, it could happen very quickly, you know, get your limit in the box, but you're also going to be able to target mangrove snapper and other fish like grunts and possible kingfish. If you get a little bit off the rock, it could even be hogfish. But most what I've seen on the cleaning tables in June is going to be your gag grouper and big mango snappers. Ooh. Now, real shallow now, there's still the possibility of keeper gags being caught as shallow as 5 to 10 feet. And what I suggest with those, it depends on how much floating grass we have. You can use casting plugs like Bomber Long A's or the Rapala F14s. But you can also use live pinfish, and it's a good technique to chum with a lot of pinfish and get the bite going, and then free line your pinfish over there near the structure. But being that shallow, you got to be very careful about how close you get to it, because if you're close enough that they feel the pressure change in the boat or the hull slap, you know, you're going to have to really work to get that bite to happen.
Aha. Now, you mentioned chumming with pinfish. You chumming with live pinfish?
Live pinfish. It's a big thing over here on the west side up on the Big Bend. I know some captains that have as many as 30 traps out there. So they can, you know, like a little south of us, they call it blacking out a live well. Same thing up this way, but with live pinfish. So you can get a couple of those and get those and cripple them up a little bit and start slinging it over the rock and get them fired up. And there's occasion that we do get white bait or threadfin up this way, and you just got to know where they're at. And a lot of times those baits will come further south toward Bayport, toward markers out there, or dimpling around rocks. Now we get them up toward Crystal River and the Barge Canal Channel around some of the bigger markers up there, and there's a couple guys I know that will go out there and cast at them, and those also make excellent baits, but it's just a lot more work to get.
I see. Well, I've never heard of chumming with live pinfish before. That's a fascinating way to do it. So so how do you single out catching bigger grouper? What's your rigging like?
Well, if you're going to bottom fish, it's basically, I like to use 60-pound mono and just straight up to a 5/0 circle hook with about a 1 ounce weight, like a knocker rig. That's my favorite way. Throw it next to the rock and let it lay. Now, if you're getting them up and they're hitting those surface baits with chumming, I've had really good luck using a heavy spinning rod, something with a little bit of backbone, and 30-pound braid to a 60-pound leader with that 5/0, circle hook in the back of the pinfish and casting it over and just letting the current carry them across the top. If you get them fired up, I've seen them come up on top and hit it just like a bass.
Woo,
so,
sweet.
It takes a little bit, of time to get that to happen. Now, as we are in June and it gets warmer, that bite wanes out until later in the fall when the water temperature drops. So, but there's still the chance the first week of June, and there's always a lot of people get in there and they're spear fishermen. So if they don't bite bait, they'll bite steel.
Are you a big fluorocarbon guy for them?
I do like fluorocarbon, but you know what? I've just used straight up, just mono leader before when the bite's on. As long as you got the fish going, I don't think they shy from it. They're not as peculiar as I've seen the mangrove snapper.
Gotcha. Yeah, mangrove snapper's got better eyesight than a gag grouper, no doubt. Hey, that's a great report, and we appreciate it so much, William. I think you just helped everybody in the Big Bend catch more grouper once June 1st gets here. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yep, I'll be right down here in downtown Homosassa.
You got it. Thank you, Captain William Toney. William's Report, of course, is brought to you each and every week with all our action spotters. By Yamaha, reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. All right, you know what that means? We're going to head out west a little bit as we work our way out through the Big Bend, headed west. We will check in with Captain Kevin Lanier from KC Sport Fishing Adventures. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Captain Rick, doing good. How about yourself?
I've got a feeling as we get closer to June 1st, that beautiful World Cat is just shining. I'll bet it's waxed up. I'll bet it's ready to go.
It's like getting ready to take a date to the prom. That's
what
it looks like about right now.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, what are we going to talk about? What's your number one target in June, as if I didn't know?
Hey, the Panhandle is red snapper, my friend. Red snapper all the way.
Well, there's a lot of different size red snapper and a lot of different ones that you might want to take home. What size are you targeting, and how are you doing it?
Well, in most cases, we're targeting fish in the 18 to 24-inch range. I mean, it's hard to, specify targets, things like that. When we're going after big red snapper, we're going to use live bait. If we're going after keeper red snapper, good for the dinner plate, it's not as important. We can use our cigar minnows, we can use our sardines, jigs, things like that. But if we're going after those big ones, we're going after it with live bait.
Uh-huh. And what's your favorite live bait?
It's hard to say. I mean, I guess my favorite, if I can get them, are pinfish.
Okay.
I mean, but we don't always, we can't always get them. So, you get into bigger baits, you're going to get into grouper baits and things like that. But if we can get a thread fin, if we can get a live cigar minnow, if we can get a pinfish, the red snapper cannot resist them.
Yep. You're exactly right. And I agree with you, by the way. Give me that 8-pound snapper on the dinner table, much more than that 25.
Well, you got guys that come down here that, want to go after a trophy red snapper, and that's fine. But the majority of people that come down here want to catch red snapper, take them home. An 18 to a 24-inch red snapper, 20-inch red snapper, that's big fish for most people.
Yeah, it's a good fish. Kevin, help me out. What's your rigging like?
We run a traditional Carolina rig with a sliding sinker, egg sinker in front of a swivel with a bead. We're running anywhere from 8 to 12 ounces, depending on current. For red snapper, I run a 3 to 4 foot, 80-pound leader with a 6-aught circle hook, and those are our go-to rigs unless we're using a jig. Then we're using a 60-pound, about a 2.5-foot piece of 60-pound top shot with that above the jig.
Are you a big fluorocarbon guy?
No? I'm not. Because when they're down there and they're hungry, it don't make a difference.
Yeah,
I mean,
they see a live pinfish, they're going to eat it, huh?
I tend to be a little more terminal wary when I'm fishing for grouper because I use a longer leader. But on red snapper, I don't care. I think you could put a banana peel down there if you got them stirred up.
It's getting that way more every year. Help me out a little bit on finding spots. Do you look for big pieces of bottom? You like a little piece of hard bottom? What are you looking for when you're looking for good red snapper structure?
Well, we're looking for early in the year. We're going to find them on structure. We're going to find them on wreck. We're going to find them on, even some of our man-made structure from Mexico Beach Artificial Reef Association. But when it gets down to brass tacks and I'm looking for them, I'm out there on that hard bottom. And when I pull up on a spot that I know they're there, you very well could see absolutely nothing on your screen.
Right.
It could look like I-10, flat as could be.
Mm-hmm. But boy, once they show up, they sure show on the screen, don't they?
Well, one trick that we use is everybody's first weight down hits the bottom.
Okay.
We ring the dinner bell, then we come up off the bottom. But you get them out there, and you'll see 1 or 2, then you'll see 8 or 10, then you'll see a blob come out of those rocks. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm with you. And a piece of advice that I'd like to pass along, and I wish we got to deal with it here on the East Coast, but I learned it a long time ago on the East Coast. When you find those little flat pieces of bottom that not very many people fish, and now your limit over there is 2 per person, right?
Yeah.
So if you got 2 guys that charter you and they catch 4, if that was my boat, Cap, the next sound they hear would be the engines firing up. Am I right?
Well, a lot of times, and yes, you're right. When I've got a small group like that, or I've got guys that are seriously concentrating on fishing, I'll ask them before we head out there, what's your minimum, what you looking for? And a lot of guys will say, we're not going to keep anything over 24 inches, or we would prefer not to. And those guys, we are a little more careful about them. But when I've got a group that just wants to catch fish, I mean, we'll hit a couple of, we'll hit fish, we'll get a limit, and then we'll go do something else. We got vermilions, we got porgies, we got black snapper. There's a lot of things we can do above and beyond red snapper. But I will not sit on a spot and kill red snapper.
Right. I am not big on throwing back and culling. I am big on you put a bait down to match the size red snapper you want to catch. Once he's in the boat, we're out of here. It just works for me because, especially in your case, Cap, you got, 45 days this year?
We got more than that. We run June 1st through August 3rd.
Wow. Yeah, you do. You got 63 days this year, 64. You got to be able to fish those spots more than once. You need to get your limit of fish for the people that want them and get yourself out of there so you can come back there next month, right?
Yeah, that's true. But, you know as well as I do, if you got a family on board that's trying to catch some fish and you got 4 guys on board that are real serious fishermen, you might do things a little bit different on those trips.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Got to keep your customers happy, no doubt. Well, I think you just helped everybody out there catch more red snapper this season, and I appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Well, we'll be back here next week, and we'll be knee-deep in red snapper, hopefully shortly.
And I'm sure you're saving me up some so I can come over there and get them. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
I appreciate it, Cap. We'll talk next week. Thank you. You can't get out of Florida till you go through the Panhandle, and right at the edge is where we run into our buddy Captain Tyler Massey, and he has been waiting for June to get here. Tyler, you got a fish you like for June, don't you?
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of fish we like for June, but the one I'm going to talk about is king mackerel for us today. King mackerel, it's an excellent fish for our customers to catch. Probably my favorite charter fishing fish to target for the customers. It's a big fish for its weight. It seems like a lot bigger of a fish than a lot of times they are, but it's an awesome bite a lot of times. Exciting, it runs real fast, and they're not typically too hard to reel in either. So it's an excellent fish for us and my guys to target with their clients.
Okay, now help me out. Are we talking catching a bunch of numbers or king mackerel? And what's different in that versus trying to catch a big king mackerel because it's tournament time?
So numbers is always our game, for the most part, and it should be for most recreational fishermen in general. When we're fishing for numbers, there's a couple of ways we can do it. A lot of times I always take some live baits with me, whether it's cigar minnows or sardines, and those get you more bites for sure. And then if you want to catch a bigger one, hardtails, without a doubt, is the best one. Blue runners, hardtails, same thing. That is the best bait to catch a big king mackerel up in our area anyway. So, catch a variety of live baits on your way out and have those in the live well. But another way, you can also troll for them, and there's plenty of lures. You can use spoons, all kinds of stuff. King mackerel's not super picky most of the time.
I got it. Okay. How deep are you starting? Where are you starting to look for them?
So, starting here, this time of year, we start fishing for them right outside of our pass. We've got a couple wrecks. There's a sunken battleship called the USS Massachusetts, and it's loaded with bait, starting in the summertime. So it's easy. You go there, you catch your bait, and you immediately put some out when you catch them. It's 25 foot of water. It's a 200-foot sunken battleship from maybe the 40s or 30s. It's been there for a long time, and we catch so many fish there throughout the year.
What does your dead bait spread look like when you're fishing there?
So if we're pulling lures there, a lot of times it's a little shallower. We just pull a lot of times it's just a couple, maybe 2 or 3 Yozuri type trolling plugs. A stretch. The small stretch lures, a stretch 15, probably a little too big, gets a little too deep there. But anywhere else, in deeper water, they eat all kinds of stuff. You can use rig ballyhoos, any of those kind of skirted lures, small islanders, all that stuff works. But they bite the trolling plugs, pretty dang good. That's super easy for a lot of people. So after we fish we try around that wreck. The next area is our buoys. We got buoys that run out of the 3 miles out off the beach, so they end up in about 50 foot of water. And then there's quite a few other wrecks in that 50 foot range. So that's where we start focusing in the closer wrecks to the beach.
Outstanding. All right. Now, when you're doing bigger fish, it's all hardtails. And are you drifting for them? You anchoring or you bump trolling?
So we bump troll all the time with most live baits. The cigar mode stuff, it's usually in and out of gear. Hardtails, you can leave your motors in gear. You can fish up to 4 baits when you're fishing hardtails. We fish a couple on the downriggers and a couple on the surface. So you can use if you don't have downriggers, you can just fish 2 surface baits also. But when we're trying to catch a big one, we want to focus on a little bit deeper water. I think we start probably fishing around that 100 foot. We fish live bottom areas, so we have a lot of live bottoms, corals, rocks, ledges, that kind of stuff. And those are great areas for the bigger king mackerels. And also out there, it's our drop off we call the edge or the ridge, and it drops from like 180 to 220 foot. And there's a lot of big king mackerels out there too. That's our more local big king mackerel spots. Other than that, we got to run to our west and fish oil rigs. I don't know if you've ever fished oil rigs before, but they're magical.
Oh yeah.
And it's an incredible fishery around the oil rigs. We have some that are pretty close, south of Mobile Bay, and that's not too far. But if you're looking for a big king mackerel, it's definitely worth the run to go fish those oil rigs. Maybe like 45, 50 miles from our path. But you can really catch them in the 50 plus range over there pretty consistently.
Every serious king mackerel fisherman I know says there's no place like the oil rigs when you want to catch giant mackerel.
For sure.
I've talked to so many guys who went out there to fish their first SKA tournament, and they had a pair of 40s to weigh in, and they're just all high-fiving and hooting and hollering, and they throw those fish on the deck, and the weighmaster says, nice fish. Next. That's not a big fish over there. But Tyler, thank you so much. I think you just helped everybody out in the Panhandle catch more kingfish in June, and we appreciate it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
We'll be here.
All right, Captain Tyler Massey brings our report to a close this evening. Well, I kind of wanted to do something different, and I'm glad we did it. It was a lot of fun. Up in Northeast Florida, Captain David Borges told us all about how to catch more redfish in June, and as we worked our way around the state, everybody had a favorite fish, and everybody had a little bit different way of catching them. My goodness, I can't wait. I'd love to get down there and get in on some of that permit fishing in Southwest Florida. The grouper and snapper guys are fired up. June is their time in the Gulf. I can't wait till we get the Atlantic regulations in much better shape than they are so we can get more excited about our snapper season over here. I hope you enjoyed our Action Spotter trip this evening. I know I sure did. Of course, it's brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By DOA Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Hey, for Florida Sportsman Magazine, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and until next week, we'll see you on the rip.